Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Arshad bin Abu Bakar and today I'm going to be presenting a topic on Islamic perspectives on international relations, or in other words, Islam in IR. So, what is international relations? Although most of you may probably already aware of this, but it is worth the highlight to mention. Well, according to Goldstein in his book International Relations, 10th edition, generally, IR is the relationship between world's government. This includes the involvement of various types of actors. Such actors can be international organizations, multinational corporations, and even individuals. This connection can be observed through the social structures and processes, such as through the economics, culture, and domestic politics, with the involvement of geographical and historical influences. All of these elements combined are what power the main idea or the main trend of IR that we see today. Okay, moving on. IR in Islam, or how Islam approach or perceive IR. Before we go deeper on this, let me just address a few things. Since the last 2 decades, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the notion of an Islamic threat to world peace and security have become even more highlighted. Most Westerners or Orientalists who continuously misconstrue many Islamic precepts have maintained these sentiments. A good example of one of these precepts would be the idea that a Muslim bears a religious duty to kill any unbeliever when jihad breaks out. Furthermore, again, some Western writers also argue that Islam was spread by brute force. On the other hand, the European scholars claim that Islam is a religion of violence, which was spread by the sword. As we can see, both of these claims generally highlighted the same idea of how Islam was and being spread. However, there are some scholars from the West who have a deep appreciation for Islamic thought and teaching argued both of these sentiments. This is due to the scholars sees these issues as some sort of distortion. Moving on to the next point. Let's look on how Muslims view non-Muslims in terms of IR. According to Islamic sources and traditions, Islam demonstrates the principle of international relations among nations in terms of assumptions by these two, which are the mu'minun, believers, and mu'ahidun, the non-believers. Mu'ahidun then is divided into 3 groups, which are the muharribin, people in constant war, or in Malay we call it golongan yang perlu diperangi oleh Muslim ataupun darah yang halal diperangi oleh Muslim. Next is the Ahlul Ahad, people in covenant with Islam, and the Ahlul Dhimma, the tolerated, respected, and protected non-Muslims, subjects under Islamic authority who offered protection and peaceful relations in exchange for acceptance of the Muslim authority and payment of jizya. Those relationships between the mentioned categories creates the division of the world into 2 parts, which are Darul Islam, the territory of Islamic State, and Darul Harb, the enemy territory. At the same time, the system of relations also addresses the status of people who did not fully belong to either territory. This points to the special character of Siyah, whereby Siyah of nations applies to both within and without Darul Islam. As most of us know, according to Muslim sources and traditions, Islam is the one truly religion that addresses all people. Its ruling should apply to all people without distinction between tribe, nation, or race. The goal of Sharia is to establish one human society that follows one system. However, this goal has never attained its final state due to Islam particularly has no control over nations, nor has Sharia become the religious code of the world. This is because of the existing political and social circumstances. Sharia could only be applied in places where Islam is the dominant religion, or where the majority of people submitted to Islam and accepted its rulings. Now, let us look at how the system of relations is applied. As I mentioned before, according to Islam, the world is divided into 2, which are firstly Darul Islam and secondly Darul Harb. So, Darul Islam, Darul Islam means the territory that enforces the rulings of Sharia, where Muslims are able to practice legal rulings of Islam. Any place or territory populated by a majority of Muslim residents, or any place that is conquered by Muslims and ruled by them, even if the majority of its inhabitants are non-Muslims, as well as any place that is conquered and ruled by non-Muslims, but the Muslims residents are free to implement Islamic rulings, is Darul Islam. To add to that, Darul Islam is where the protection of Islam is extended to them. There is the Muslims and the Dhimmiyun. Some modern scholars will add another characteristic to this definition, which is the territories where Muslims are allowed to practice their faith unhindered, whether or not Muslims are in full control of the civil authority. These are some of the examples of Darul Islam, which are Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states such as Kuwait and Oman, Pakistan. Next is the states that are also considered as Darul Islam, even though the governments do not incorporate Sharia: Egypt, Syria, and Turkey. Okay, moving on to the next Dar, which is Darul Harb. Darul Harb is an all non-Islamic territories that are governed by non-Muslims, where the laws enforced within that territory are based on non-Islamic source. Whether these territories are governed by single or multi-party systems, and regardless of whether or not non-Muslims reside there, as long as the Muslims living there are incapable of enforcing Islamic rulings, then that territory is part of Darul Harb. In simple terms, Darul Harb is the states that are exclusive of Islamic authority. However, there is a second opinion regarding the definition of Darul Harb. According to another modern scholar, the lack of Islamic authority over a certain nation or state does not automatically make it a territory of Darul Harb. There are three conditions that need to be met to declare a place Darul Harb. Firstly, if the power and authority belong to non-Muslim. Second, if the territory is settled by Muslims, but there is an expectation of enemy attack. Third, if the Muslims or dhimmis who continue to live in the Dar lack the protection that was accorded when the territory was part of Darul Islam. However, the third condition seems meaningless since originally the relations between Muslim and non-Muslim are supposed to be peaceful. Okay, moving on. As I mentioned earlier, the Dar that accepts and enforces the Islamic rulings and is under Islamic authority is considered as Darul Islam, according to the majority of modern Muslim scholars. In all other circumstances mentioned earlier, the Dar will remain as Darul Harb. However, in recent times, the status of Darul Harb can further be modified, resulting in the emergence of a third Dar, which is called Darul Ahad. Darul Ahad, similar to what defines Ahad, means the territory in treaty relation with Islam. It was initially defined as a part of Darul Harb, meaning that even though the status of the territory is in treaty relation with Islamic territories, this is due to the fact that there must be some type of an agreement making the Al-Dhimma a subject population to Darul Islam. Otherwise, the population is simply no longer part of Darul Islam, and then by definition, it should be a part of Darul Harb. There should not be another Dar. But then again, this issue regarding the third Dar was discussed among modern scholars, thus again defining Darul Ahad as a third Dar. This is solely due to contemporary issues that has arisen during that time. As time goes by, more modern scholars rejected this claim. This is because most of the interpretations regarding the third Dar are only based on personal interpretations of the modern scholars. It was only due to modern scholars' intervention tackling this issue. Western scholars' definition of the both Dars, Darul Islam and Darul Harb, make no reference to the possibility of a third independent Dar. Then, Darul Ahad was considered as a temporary territory between Darul Islam and Darul Harb. In other words, it goes back to the original definition, which is the division of the world into two parts, which is Darul Islam and Darul Harb only. Lastly, to conclude my presentation today, Islamic IR, or Islamic perspectives of IR, is a very intricate topic, as most of its sentiments are changing regularly as time goes by. To put it in simpler terms, Islamic IR generally revolves around the relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims. The goal of Islam in IR is solely based on peaceful premises and not a religious conflict. Why? This is because Islam promotes peacefulness, and according to Islamic sources and traditions, it should be regarded as the highest aim of the international system. So that is all from me. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.